Hello and welcome to Analog IAS Academy. And this is a session on a discussion of the mains question paper UPSC, which morning aspirants have. Now, if you go through the geography questions, GS paper 1, all the questions, if you read, they are easy to moderate level. They're not that difficult and they are not very easy also. So hence we say it is easy to moderate level. And one question you have seen directly from NCRT. And few questions are there where base of NCRT is also required. And almost all 85 marks of questions were appeared from geography section. Now we'll take up these questions which were asked and also in what references such questions were asked in the examination. Now take up the first question. How are the climate change and the sea level rise affecting the very existence of many island nations? Discuss with examples. So here the question demands on two perspectives, the impact of climate change on the island nations. Now the moment when you talk about island nations, there are many islands which are small and even there are some which are comparatively. So the impact of climate change on these is seen in the context of rise in the temperature. Plus, it can also be seen in the impact of increasing number of cyclones, storms. Then more specifically, they are talking about the sea level rise. So these are the things which you should remember in that. Then the second part is that how it is affecting their very existence. So it means that impact of climate change on that. Now when you talk about the impact of climate change, we have to understand something associated the impact on the socio-economic perspective and also on the environmental perspective, how they are affecting island countries. Now this question was asked because recently we come across the statement that Tuvalu is the first country in the world where it will be completely migrated towards the Australia. Apart from that, we also have something called as Vanuatu. So this is also having one of the island country which is having the greatest threat with reference to the impact of sea level rising. Now, how the climate change and sea level rise has affected? Now, the impact of climate change with reference to sea level is because of the climate change, the increasing of the temperature is responsible for melting of the glacier, and as the glacier melts, the sea level will rise. This is one point. Second, because of the increasing of the temperature, as the oceans are considered as the major carbon sink, so large amount of carbon dioxide is entering into the ocean, and this is responsible for increasing the average temperature of the ocean. And that is where increasing temperature makes the expansion of ocean water. And as the ocean water expands, so this will also increase the water level in that area. So this is associated with the increasing temperature, melting of the ice, and also the chemistry of the water. Now, apart from that, because of increasing of the concentration of carbon dioxide, this carbon dioxide enters into the ocean water and creates mild carbonic acid, and we refer that as ocean acidification. And this ocean acidification is one of the major reasons for affecting many marine resources like corals and other species where they are having hard calcareous skeleton. And you have to remember that these islands are a part of what we call it as blue economy. Blue economy. So hence in this regard, how are the climate change and the sea level rise are affecting the very existence? So the impact of climate change on the island nations are their submergence, affecting the coastal biodiversity, and also it is affecting their economic parameters. Like they promote tourism sector, They affect the coral reef, etc. Coral reef. So this is something which is expected in this question. How are the climate change and the sea level rise are affecting the existence? Keeping this as an introduction, this has to be your main body with reference. Now, sector wise when we talk, it is affecting the agriculture sector there. Industries, which depends on that. When you talk about industries, it can be tourism industry or the ports and other things which depends on that. As there is a lack of opportunities, poverty will increase in that region. And as the water level increases, it affects the mangroves and biodiversity and also the coral perspectives in that region. And the number of cyclones will also increase as the temperature increases and as the volume of the water also increases. Because due to increase of the temperature, the sea surface temperature of ocean increases, which accelerates the formation of tropical cyclones, which creates large amount of disasters, which is affecting the populations which are staying in that region. So this is introduction, and then you talk about the main body. Then when you talk about the way forward, in the way forward you can mention that according to the IPCC 4th assessment report, it said that the tropical countries are the one which will be most affected by the impact of climate change, and majority of the islands who are facing or which are facing the impact of climate change are in the tropical region only, and that is where they will be affected by cyclones, droughts, storms, etc. And in this regard, they always require financial and technical assistance for their survival. And that is the reason why we are emphasizing on providing a good structured financial assistance in the form of new collective quantified goal, which has been framed in the COP29. And along with that, making an effort for $1.3 trillion by 2035. And also we are working on having a proper fund for loss and damage, that is in spite of mitigation and adaptation, they need certain financial assistance. So we are working on that part. We, in the sense UNFCCC is working on that part, that they can be a fund which is called as the loss and damage fund, which can become a very important source for their survival. So that is called as the way forward perspectives. Introduction includes what is climate change and how it is affecting, then its impact, social impact, economic impact, and then way forward with reference to that. As it is for 150 words, reduce your content to as much as possible. Now the second question is that, what are the non-farm primary activities and how are these activities are related to physiographic features in India? So here it is about physiographic features of India. And then again, non-farm primary activity. Now this question was asked because of something called as the state of rural youth employment of 2020, where they have said that agriculture is not an attractive entity. And that's why rural youth are moving towards non-agriculture. Right. So in this regard, the question was, now what are the non-farm primary activities? Now any country, when we talk about that, so all the economic activities are classified into primary, then secondary, and then tertiary, and then we are having quinaries also. In the primary, we are having something called as farm or agriculture, and then we are having something called as non-farm part. Now non-farm is not associated directly with the agriculture, and it is mainly depend on land, mainly depend on the land, where the rural youth emphasizes on something called as employment opportunities, more specifically self-employment. They are emphasizing on mining sector. They are emphasizing on animal husbandry or animal rearing, etc. So this is something which you have to remember. So when you're writing answers, you should remember that. What are non-farm primary activities? So all the economic activities are classified into primary, secondary and tertiary. In this primary, we can subdivide them into agrarian or farm and non-farm. So all the economic activities in the rural economy which are not associated directly with the agriculture, we refer them as non-farm activities, which mainly depend on land and the nature of the land. So this is some rough idea. Now physiographic features of India and how you are connecting to that. Now when you talk about Indian perspectives, you have to make sure that image of India is very good. It is very important. You are drawing a map of India. So in the map of India, you can show that India is divided into 5 physiographic. Then India has a long coastline of 11,098 kilometers, a basic idea. And as India is having 5 major divisions, it consists of mountain areas, it consists of large amount of forest area, it consists of desert areas, it consists of peninsular region which is rich with the minerals, and it consists of coastal areas, the long coastal area of 11,098 kilometers. Now all these non-farm activities which can be done with the land parts are, when you talk about forest, so minor forest products will be one of the important asset for them to have economic activity. Coastal areas, fishing activities, marine fishing activities, peninsular region which is rich with the minerals, mining activities, very important. If you take Chota Nagpur Plateau, which is called as Ruhr of India, rich with large amount of mineral resources in that region. Now in the desert areas, we find as it is having less amount of rainfall, the livestock resources plays an important role, where we find large amount of animal resources or animal husbandry is dominant in that area. Now if you see the northern plains, these northern plains are very rich in soil fertility, so agrarian activities are feasible, but apart from agrarian, food processing industries will be more beneficial, which are non-farm. So food processing industries. Right. In the same way, in the mountain regions also, saffron cultivation and their processing, then horticulture and their processing. So all these are the major things where we have to emphasize the connectivity, that how the physiographic features help in making the non-farm primary practice. And when you are concluding this answer, you have to conclude that in the present context, government is emphasizing with many schemes to tap the physiographic features to provide employment opportunities there. By many programs like Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana, you can tell, organic farming, so that they will help in having good amount of processing perspectives, right? And then also you can give an idea about the FDIs, the investments which are there in all the sections, right? So all these are referred as the economic activities which help in the non-farm primary sectors. So introduction, map of India, and then physiographic divisions, and how you can link them with the non-farm primary activity. So this is something which is associated with the question. Now, explain briefly the ecological and economic benefits of solar energy generation in India with suitable examples. Now, in this regard, when you talk about solar energy, there has to be a proper introduction. Now, in the context of India, when we discuss about the energy or installed capacity, we know that 51% of installed capacity in India is from fossil fuel and 49% is from non-fossil fuel. And in this 49%, the renewable energy is a dominant factor, and within the renewable energy, the solar energy has a lion's share. Right. And according to the present data, if you take 2025, impact of the policies are such that the India's social or the solar energy capacity has reached to somewhere around 119 gigawatts, which is a very significant number. And India has also made that it will be reaching to carbon neutrality by 2070, and also that India will generate the energy from non-fossil fuel. somewhere around 500 gigawatts by 2030. So in all this, solar energy plays an important role. So at least few of this statistics also, if you mention, that is sufficient, right? So in this context, the solar energy plays an important role, and in India, because of India's carbon neutrality policy, or because of India's energy production from non-fossil fuel, where we are planning to have 500 gigawatts, solar energy plays an important role. This is one perspective. Then this solar energy is something which is a game changer in the context of India's energy scenario. And that is why we have made many programs and policies in that. Take an example of International Solar Alliance and many schemes like Pradhan Mantri Saurya Ghar Yojana or Muft Bijli. Many such schemes are given where it can play an important role in the context of solar energy perspectives. Now, coming down to its ecological and economic benefits. So, ecological benefits are, or economic benefits are, this solar energy is cost saving, electricity bills will be comparatively less, it generates employment opportunities in the rural as well as urban areas. It helps in increasing the rural manufacturing. So many grids, many things will be there. So rural manufacturing sector will be. Then it will help in bringing more amount of investments in this sector. So large amount of investments, FDIs can be seen, and many technology or many financial investments can be seen. Now environmental concern. The moment when you use the renewable energy, it means that it is a non-fossil fuels, so it will reduce the emission of greenhouse gas. So hence it will help in reducing the global warming perspective or help in reducing the climate change issue. Then if you take the solar energy development, the impact of the solar energy generation on the land is comparatively less than the other type of fossil fuel generation like petroleum, coal, etc. Then it helps in conserving the other resources like river resources, land resources, forest resources, etc. It reduces the pollution. The reason is when we use large amount of fossil fuels, so these fossil fuels emit large amount of gases, ash, soot, etc., which can impact on the air pollution. And these air pollutions are always associated with large amount of disease here, right? So hence it reduces many disease and it reduces the impact of pollution, not only in the urban areas, even in the rural areas. So environmental impact and ecological impact and economic benefits. Now the way forward. In the context of way forward, India is a tropical country where we are having 365 days of sunlight. And this solar energy development will help in reducing the pressure on the fossil fuel. And the advantage of the solar energy is we can store it and use it over a longer period of time. And it can also be transmitted to the long distance. And by that you can conclude your answer. So this is some rough idea about the ecological and economic benefits of the solar energy generation. Now the next question which was asked is, what are tsunamis and how and where they are formed, what are their consequences? Now in this case you can mention the definition of tsunami. Tsunamis are referred as a harbor waves, a Japanese term. So they are series of the waves which produces the huge displacement of water in the coastal areas. Now, these tsunamis are developed or produced by many factors. They are formed by many. The reasons for them. One is you can mention earthquake, more specifically underwater earthquake, and this has to be shallow earthquake or strong earthquake. This one. Second one is you can mention about volcanic activities. So during the volcanic activities, more specifically again underwater volcanic activity. So underwater volcanic activity where the magma combines with the water and it creates a phreatic explosion which makes the collapsing of the volcanic wall. And this creates underwater landslide. And this underwater landslide is also responsible for the tsunamis. Or sometimes we say the impact of meteorites. So all these are referred as the factors which are responsible for formation of the tsunamis. Now, when you are talking about examples, you can give an example of the 2004 earthquake, more specifically about the Sunda megathrust. So this Sunda megathrust in Indonesia and Sumatra region, which was of magnitude 9.2, triggered the tsunamis, and this affected India and many neighboring countries, including Sri Lanka and other parts. Now, what are their consequences? So when you talk about the consequences of tsunamis, tsunamis will always have an impact. More specifically, we can talk about economic impact. The economic impact will be, they will affect the industries which are in the coastal areas. And as the saline water enters there, it will affect the agriculture activity, that is the salinity of the soil is this one. Then these tsunamis, they affect the life, injuries, death. These tsunamis, they also affect the biodiversity. And when you talk about biodiversity, it is affecting the mangroves, it is affecting the corals. So it affects not only economic, the social perspective and biodiversity perspective as well. Because majority of the economic activities and the settlements are there in the coastal area, the coastal areas. So that completes your second part. Consequence, right? What are the tsunamis? A definition of tsunami, how and where they are formed. So it is the reason for them: earthquakes, volcanic activities, and meteorite, right? Then explain with the examples. You can give an example of the Sunda megathrust and the impact of that which is seen in this. Right. Now the tsunami of 2004, it affected Andaman Nicobar Islands, the mangroves of Andaman Nicobar Islands, the coral deposits of the coastal area. Many marine species were affected. Migration of the species was done. Migration of the local communities was done. So all these are the consequences of the tsunami which took place in the year 2004. As it is for 150 words, try to limit your content within the word. Right. Now when you talk about way forward, you should mention that these tsunamis are considered as the natural disasters. These tsunamis are considered as the natural disasters. And in the natural disasters, pre-disaster plays a very important role. And that is why we have to emphasize on early warning systems. And always remember that as it is extreme weather-based disaster, early warning system plays an important role. We have to emphasize more on early warning system. Then we have to be good in preparedness. And creating awareness among the people. And this awareness among the people is also being carried by the drills or mock drills which is done by UNESCO. So by working on these, we can reduce the impact of tsunamis in the coastal community. So by that you can conclude your answer. Now, next question is, give a geographical explanation of the distribution of offshore oil reserves of the world. How are they different from the onshore occurrences? Now when you are talking about offshore and onshore, all the type of oil reserves which are developed or which are produced on the land areas, that is within the land and below the oceans. So we refer this as onshore and we refer this as offshore. Right. And you should remember that this oil is a fossil fuel. Oil is a fossil fuel. And this oil, as it is fossil fuel, we find that it is deposited in the sedimentary rocks of land as well as in the. So hence large amount of oil resources are found in the land areas and the ocean parts, that is in the oceanic shelf, right, and in the coastal regions of the region. Then when you talk about the distribution of the major offshores, so to write about the major offshores, this is very factual, and this you have to depend on the data where Atlantic Ocean margins, Middle East and Persian Gulf, North American area, Asia Pacific area, South China Sea, which is very rich in the petroleum resources. Then in India, we also find certain regions which are dominantly seen in the context of the offshore. Now for that, you can develop the map of the world. You can produce, or sorry, you can draw the map of world. And in that, if you project 2 or 3 like North Sea, Middle East, Persian Gulf, that is more than sufficient to give a good marks in that part. Now, how they are different from onshore? So in the context of onshore and offshore, here the resources will be comparatively less. In the offshore, the resources will be more. Now when we talk about their volume, less volume, comparatively more. Then when you talk about their exploration and attraction, so the exploration and attraction of the offshore is more difficult compared to that of onshore. The cost of production of the offshore will be very high compared to that of onshore. Reserves and potential, huge amount of reserves and potential capacities are there in the offshore rather than that of onshore. Risk and safety. So there is high amount of risk associated with extraction in the offshore. The reason is that these ocean bodies or water bodies are always affected by cyclones, storms, etc. So always there will be a risk involved in the extraction, and safety is also seen as criteria. But we don't find such type of risk associated in the land areas. Environmental risk. Now in the offshore, we find water pollution is associated with leakage of the petroleum. So marine pollution is dominant in these areas. Of course, in the land, the groundwater pollution is there, but here we find marine pollution is dominant in the offshore. And hence, international laws and international regulations will be seen predominantly applied in the offshore part. Right. Contribution and geopolitics. The offshore contributes more to the world economic development compared to that of onshore. Then, as it is associated with international boundaries in the oceans, so obviously it is affected with international geopolitical consideration, UNCLOS and other resources or other factors which. So this is something which is advantage or disadvantage or issues associated with the onshore and offshore. As it is asked for 15 marks, so map is mandatory here, differentiation is mandatory, and also some data which talks about the distributions, factual data has to be. Now next. Discuss how the changes in the shape and size of the continent and ocean basins of the planet take places due to tectonic movement of the crustal masses. Now again, this is for 15. Now this is a completely factual question, in the sense fact plus concept is required. Now this consists of two parts. The first one is something called as plate tectonic, and second one is something which is associated with the Wilson cycle. Wilson cycles, or we refer that as supercontinent cycles. Supercontinent. Right. So this is also associated with a part of current affairs. So in the first part, you can mention that according to the plate tectonic theory, entire lithosphere crust is divided into major and minor lithospheric plates. And these plates, they always make the movement because of the convection currents which are developed in the asthenosphere. And we have three types of movement: the convergent, the divergent, and conservative type or transverse one. Now in the convergent, two plates merge or they come close to each other, and this creates the destruction of the land or destruction of the continent part. When they converge, they destruct. So hence we refer that as destructive in the. Now there are oceanic and oceanic convergence, continent and continent convergence, and oceanic and continent crustal convergence. You can give one or two examples of that. Like Indian plate colliding with the Eurasian plate created Himalayas. Again the land was shrunk. Right. So in the same way, when you talk about divergence, when the two plates move away from each other, we refer that as divergent plate. And these are something which are creating the new crusts, and hence we refer them as constructive in the nature. Constructive in the, like sea floor spreading concept, Red Sea formation, then Arabian Peninsula moving from the African part and grafting to the Asia, becoming Arabian Peninsula. So all these are the areas where we find there has been change in the shape and the sizes of the continent. Right. So Arabian Peninsula moving from African part, right, and Red Sea, creation of the Red Sea, and again formation of Rockies, Andes with the subduction part, and Indian plate colliding with the Eurasian plate. So this becomes the half portion, plate tectonic theory and these first. Then what is the supercontinent cycle and how it is also associated with the changing the land pattern? Now, according to the supercontinent cycle, or what we refer them as Wilson cycle. So here, according to the data or a report which has been done by a study which is sponsored by UNESCO, which is called as supercontinent cycles. Supercontinent cycles and global geodynamics. So in this project, they have found that recently there has been a trench which is developed in the Atlantic Ocean. And this trench which is developed in the Atlantic Ocean is something which is responsible for the ocean which were expanding will contract. So the Atlantic Ocean will shrink. Already the Pacific Ocean is shrinking, and when all these water bodies, when they shrink, then this will create a new supercontinent. And they already proposed the name for this, which is called as Amasia or Nova Pangaea. Etc. And hence they revealed that these supercontinents are not one-time phenomena. So in the Earth's geological history, many times the supercontinents were formed and they dispersed. Supercontinents were formed and this is what they say, that as the supercontinent disperses, they create the formation of oceans, like the formation of Indian Ocean, the formation of Atlantic Ocean. So when the supercontinent spreads, they will form the oceans and they form the continents. And when the oceans shrink because of large amount of trenches which are developed, then the oceans will close and that will create something called as the supercontinent. So this becomes the half portion of that. So plate tectonic theory and Wilson cycle or the supercontinent cycle and global geodynamics will suffice as the requirement of. Then the next question is, discuss the distribution and density of the population in the Ganga river basin with special reference to land, soil and water resource. Now this is directly from NCERT book. So first you have to draw the map of India, and in the map of India show that the Indo-Gangetic plain is one of the most populated or densely populated region of the world. One of the most densely populated region of the world. Right. It consists of the states of Bihar, West Bengal, UP, which are having high density of the population. Right. Now, next is that the factors associated with the population distribution. Now, in geography or NCERT, they already showed that water plays an important role. So, in the northern plains, rivers are there, perennial rivers, and as the rivers continuously flow, there is large amount of groundwater. They are rich with aquifers. The rich aquifers, groundwater which is available, and this area is also associated with heavy rainfall. So, the rainfall is maximum and decreases towards the north, but still large amount of water availability there, which helps in agrarian activity. Then the soil is very fertile. So, in the northern plain, the soil is referred as Khadar soil and Bangar soil, which are referred as the fertile soil, which help in high amount of agriculture productivity. The yield is more. And in some areas, cropping intensity is also more there. Then climatic condition, ideal climatic condition for the cropping patterns, ideal climatic condition, land. So, here we find the land is plain area, and some areas we find that they are having gentle slope. And as they are having gentle slope and plain area, so they are ideal for human settlement and agrarian activity. Right. So, these are associated with the water, soil and land part. Now, with special reference to land, soil and water when he says, so here you have to remember that as the water is available there, the major problem associated with the water is that the pollution in the water or contamination level in the groundwater has been increased, and here we find there is a large concentration of nitrites and effluents which are entering into the river, untreated water which are entering. So, they are creating pollution in the context of the rivers as well as groundwaters, the water perspective. And during the non-rainy season, the availability of water decreases because of not proper management of the water resource. Then, the soil or land, due to overcropping and use of chemical fertilizers, the soil is losing its fertility. So, majority of the areas where the chemical fertilizers, pesticides are used, so that soil is losing its fertility perspective. It is associated with the soil and land perspective. And last you can mention, due to increasing of the population in that areas, over exploitation of the resources, land, soil and water resources is, and these over exploitation of land, soil and water resources is continuously degrading them, and that is where they will always be seen as a crisis in the context of the development of resources. Right. This is one. Then apart from that, other factors which are associated are economic factors, mineral resources. So, if you take Chota Nagpur Plateau, which is rich with mineral resources, then industries. So, these industries will always pull large amount of employment opportunities in that area. Transport sector. So, it is associated with different types of transports. Multimodal transport facilities are there. Roadways, railways, waterways, airways, etc. Then urbanization. So, urbanization is also having something called as pull factor, which pull the people from the smaller cities, that is class 4, class 5 cities, and also rural towards the urban area. Then other factors like cultural and historical part, like Varanasi, religious place, educational places. So, all these cultural and historical places, they always bring large amount of population towards this, right. So, this is some associated aspect with the distribution and density of population in the Ganga river. Along with map, explain the physical factors, analyze them with reference to land, soil and water resources, then economic factors which consist of mineral resources, industries, transport, urbanization, other factors. Then in the conclusion part, as this is the region which has large amount of the density of the country, to find a solution for that, we are working with many programs like Namami Gange to abate the river pollution, organic farming like Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana, and also finding other types of the industrial activities which can reduces the pressure on the land area, and also development of many types of economic activities like the oxbow lakes in the Ganga plain, which consist of the water which can be used for aquaculture and other perspectives. So that will help in reducing the pressure in the agriculture, which indirectly reduces the pressure on the land and soil. And also we are emphasizing on modern irrigation facilities like drip irrigation, sprinklers, and changing in the cropping patterns, which will also have an impact on the availability of the resource. So by that you can conclude the answer also, because as it is having 250 words, it has to be ended up with the proper conclusion, right? So map, fact, factors of distribution and issues associated with them, and then other factors and way forward for, right? So these were the 7 questions which were asked in the UPSC mains examination. So by this we can conclude the discussion on the questions, right? So again I'll tell that the questions which were asked here are factual questions, plus they were easy to moderate. Only thing is that from where they are taken. So 2 reports were there, from there they are picked up, and also from NCERT, and also with reference to the recent crisis like the Ukraine war, the oil resources, the Middle East part. So that is one of the major problem which is faced by the geopolitical consideration. So they are picked for that oil, onshore and offshore perspective, right? And plate tectonics and supercontinent cycles. So that is a completely factual data from NCERT, what does plate tectonics is, and then application of that which we study in bit more higher part. So that topics like that, supercontinent cycles, we call them as something called as moderate. They are not that difficult, moderate, because that was also in the news since from last 2-3 years. We find that they are talking about something called a supercontinent, meet the supercontinent, Amasia, Neopangea, etc. So it is there in the news since from few years. And also about non-farm economic or non-farm primary sector, it is also there in the news because of a report which has been given where they found that the agrarian sector is not that remunerative in the rural economy. So if you take a look of the 1 year or 2 years of current affairs, and if you are good in your NCERT part, I don't think there will be any problem in solving these mains questions of UPSC this time. Thank you.